Welcome to the behavioral interviewing video. In this video, you will see a 5-step process for conducting a professional employment interview. Within that 5-step process, you will be introduced to 3 techniques for gathering behavioral information from candidates. The first step in conducting an effective interview is to introduce yourself and establish rapport. Introducing yourself and exchanging pleasantries helps to put the candidate at ease. Watch how the interviewer quickly establishes rapport in this exchange.
Hi, Paul.
Hi.
I'm Christine. I'm Director of Client Services here at Rosewood Industries. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Come on back. Well, come on in and have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. Hey, I noticed in looking over your resume that you went to Manchester High School.
Yes.
So did I. What a small world, huh?
Really?
Yeah, I did. Hey, is Mrs. Taylor still teaching biology there?
Yeah, she's still teaching there.
She was so great.
I loved her as a teacher. She made it fun for all of the students.
Yeah, she really did.
The second step is to describe the interview process. Describing the process lets the candidate know what to expect and further reduces potential anxiety. Observe how the interviewer provides a full and clear description of the process that will be followed in the interview.
Well, Paul, let's get started with the interview. We've got about an hour together today, so I'd like to tell you how we're going to spend that time. First, of course, I want to learn all about you, your work history, your skills, and some of your experiences. And then in the latter part of the interview, I'll explain more about the job itself and answer any questions that you might have, and also talk a little bit more about next steps in the hiring process. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good.
The third step is to gather information on assigned competencies. This step is the core of a behavioral interview. In this next example, the interviewer will be gathering information on the competency of planning and organizing. During this exchange, you will observe the interviewer using the blended interview process. We will also be introducing 3 effective techniques to use in gathering information. Notice that the interviewer gradually introduces the candidate to behavioral questions. By beginning with less demanding questions, the interviewer is able to help put the candidate at ease and create a comfortable transition to more demanding behavioral questions. This approach will show you an example of using the blended interview process, which is much like digging a well. A highly effective approach is to begin with background and activity questions, followed by technical and functional questions regarding the candidate's experience. As you dig a little deeper, the self-evaluation and hypothetical questions will produce more meaningful information, all of which will bring you to the behavioral questions, where you will attain the richest, most predictive information. In the following example, you'll see the interviewer utilizing 3 types of these questions. Let's watch.
Why don't you start by telling me about your current position?
Currently, I work as a legal assistant. I'm in charge of the document production as well as research projects. It's a very interesting job.
That does sound interesting. What do you like the most about your job?
I would have to say the research aspect of it. I really like digging into complex topics and understanding it.
And what do you like the least?
I would say interacting with the clients. I prefer the backroom work.
Suppose I asked you to organize the documents on my computer. What would you do?
Well, I would start by reviewing the documents and seeing if there's any common themes between them. And then I would take those themes and make folders to place them into. And of course, review them with you to make sure the framework makes sense.
Well, that sounds logical. Can you tell me about a time where you had a really difficult kind of multi-dimensional task or project that you had to manage?
Well, I was on a civil case that took about 8 months of research. There was literally hundreds of depositions and thousands of documents that had to be categorized and summarized for the team of attorneys.
While the candidate gave a good example, this is a perfect opportunity to ask follow-up questions to obtain more specific information regarding his planning and organizing skills.
Wow, that sounds like a huge project. How did you keep track of all that information?
Well, I indexed and categorized each of the documents and then provided a summary of the most relevant information to each of the attorneys. And then I created a spreadsheet that cross-referenced between the documents and the depositions. The attorney said that my hard work played a critical role in obtaining a favorable settlement.
It is important to give candidates feedback on the kind of answers you're looking for. In this next exchange, watch how the interviewer reinforces the depth of information that the candidate is providing.
That sounds like a challenging task. You know what, that's exactly the kind of information that I'm looking for, with really good detail. Now I want you to tell me about a time when it was difficult to get everything done because of multiple deadlines, multiple activities. How did you organize your time and your efforts?
Well, last month my boss assigned me to create a rush PowerPoint presentation for a speech he had to do. However, client invoices and attorney timesheets were due that same day. So I just stayed focused and worked really hard. I didn't even get a lunch break because I wanted to make sure I got all the work done.
It's common for candidates to get off track or provide rambling answers in an interview. Being able to interrupt and refocus their answer is a useful technique for obtaining good behavioral information. Let's watch.
Sometimes it's not obvious what our priorities should be at work. Tell me about a time when you had multiple priorities and you had to determine what the top priority was.
Well, last summer, 2 assistants for other attorneys got to take vacation time, which meant that I had to meet the demands of 3 bosses over the next 2 weeks. There was so much to do, and I was just trying to make everybody happy, but each attorney had their own agenda. So one attorney was asking me to rush a research project, or I was answering the phones for each attorney. Or there's this one time they were at my desk and they were all asking me to just...
You know, excuse me, Paul, I imagine it was a really hectic couple of weeks. I'm sure you could tell me about the daily challenges for quite some time. But in order to make good use of our time, I'd like you to tell me a little bit more about how specifically you formed a strategy and then what the end result was.
Now let's look at another example of gathering information on an assigned competency. This time we will be focusing on the competency of customer orientation. In the following exchanges, you will be given an opportunity to identify the 3 techniques. See if you can identify them correctly.
Paul, could you describe a time when you went above and beyond what was required so you could meet a client's needs?
Well, sure. In my previous job, I was a project coordinator for a consulting firm. We were developing a training project, and it had a very tight deadline. The consultants would send us the drafts of the project materials, and it was our job to format, proof, and package the materials. But we didn't receive the drafts until there was only 24 hours left in the timeline. So we stayed up until 9 o'clock at night to make sure that we accomplished everything.
You referenced your team, but what was your specific role in that project?
Oh, I was in charge of proofing and formatting the materials.
And how did the client feel about your finished product?
Well, he was pretty appreciative, and now he's one of our best references.
This exchange was an example of asking follow-up questions.
I'm really enjoying learning more about your work experiences, Paul, and I like those specific examples that you're providing for me. It gives me a really good idea of how you approach work situations. Anyway, let's move on.
This was an example of providing feedback.
We both know there are some customers that are really difficult to please. Tell me about an example where you had someone really demanding and how you handled it.
I know exactly who that would be. We used to have this client who would always find something to complain about. He was a manager at an insurance company. He had about 15 employees. 2 of which are good friends of mine, and they would go on and on about how he
You know what, I'm sure that you could tell me all kinds of different situations where things were difficult. Why don't you narrow your answer down so that we can stay on track, and just tell me about one incident where you took special actions to make him happy, and then tell me about the outcome.
Sure. There was this large project that we worked with the client on where he wanted us to provide statistics. The first draft that we sent was not at all what he was looking for, so I talked to him on the phone to narrow down specifically what he wanted. And then I assured him that I would personally oversee the final product. He seemed quite happy.
Interrupt and refocus was the technique used in this example. We are now ready to move to the fourth step of the interview process, answering candidate questions. While the interview is primarily about gaining information from the candidate, it is also an opportunity for the candidate to learn more about the company and the position. Candidates usually have some questions for the interviewer, like this.
Thanks, Paul. You've shared some really great information. Now it's my turn to answer any questions you might have.
I do have a few questions. I was wondering if you could fill me in on the job and the responsibilities.
Sure. Well, first of all, the position would report to me. I travel a lot and my plans are constantly changing. So it's really important that you be very good at planning and organization. Since the position is working in client relations, it's important too to be really customer focused and be comfortable working directly with the client.
Well, that sounds very challenging, and I think my skills are very much in line with the demands. So, how soon will you be filling the position?
The final step is to conclude the interview. It is important at the end of an interview to thank the candidate for their time, as well as to describe the next steps in the process.
As far as next steps, we'll be completing our interview process by the end of next week. So once that happens, we'll make our decision, we'll notify all of the candidates, so you'll be hearing from us in about a week and a half.
Okay, that sounds good.
I appreciate you coming in today, Paul. I really enjoyed meeting you and learning more about you.
Well, thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.
In this video, you have seen an effective 5-step process for conducting a professional interview. You were also introduced to 3 techniques for gathering behavioral information. By incorporating these steps and techniques, you will be on your way to mastering the behavioral interview.